All right, good afternoon, everyone. This is LA State, a political news show covering local and state issues affecting Cal State LA students. I'm your host, Joe Brizzolara, and today we have a very special guest for this episode. We'll be talking with legendary Chicano activist Carlos Montes for the whole show. Mr. Montes, thanks for being here.
Hey, it's great to be here. Carlos Montes here, Cal State LA. It's
part of familiar
LA.
ground.
Oh,
huh?
yeah. It's in
cool.
LA. A lot of people think it's in Alhambra, but it's not. It's
That's right. So today we're going to talk about his role in the historic 68 Chicano Blowouts and the Chicano Moratorium of 1970. We're going to get his thoughts on current issues such as immigration and police reform, and we're going to talk about something we talked about last week, which is the gentrification of Boyle Heights. So stay tuned. We'll be right back after this with Mr. Montes. You're listening to LA State on Cal State LA's Golden Eagle Radio.
Major key alert, life is like school. You will be tested, so pass it.
Learn the real major keys to getting to college at GetSchooled.com. Brought to you by Get Schooled and the Ad Council.
And we're back. The show is LA State. The station is Golden Eagle Radio. Today, my guest is Carlos Montes. Mr. Montes has been a leader in the Chicano rights movement since the late 60s when he co-founded the Brown Berets. He was instrumental in the 1968 Chicano Blowouts and the 1970 Chicano Moratorium. He was a target of the FBI's notorious counterintelligence program, which disrupted the political activities of many anti-war and civil rights groups in the late 60s and 70s. He has continued his political activism throughout his life and is currently an active advocate for immigrants' rights and police reform. Again, Mr. Montes, thank you so much for making the time.
Hey, it's great to be here.
I read that you have political activism in your history, in your
Yes.
family history. Your grandfather was a member of Pancho Villa's Revolutionary Army.
He sure was, and I got a chance to meet my grandfather, Alejandro. From LA, we would go visit him in Chihuahua, in the small rural village of Las Cuevas, and he actually showed me his big old revolver.
Wow.
His hat, and he had a wooden leg.
Right.
But he had been shot off, and he would tell me the stories about it. He was a real strong man,
Yeah.
So I remember those, as a young, elementary school
Sure. And
student, yeah.
And that inspired your...
Yeah, no, that later on, that gave me a foundation. My mother always told me, be proud of your background, don't forget your history. Because, coming to L.A. as a young 6-year-old, I got thrown into the school system. I didn't know a word of English, had to learn it right away. And then I kind of bought into the assimilationism and the whitewashing of our history, because all the positive things I saw in elementary school, middle school, high school was all, the American dream.
Right.
So I started buying into that. It wasn't until later on after high school that I became radicalized.
Sure.
But that foundation helped me, keep my bearing.
Well, yeah, I wanted to ask about that radicalization. Many of the students here at Cal State LA transferred from ELAC or at East LA College, and you also went there, and that's where your political activism began, correct?
Yes. It was a combination of East LA College. I got involved in the student government, but then the Chicano student movement. But at the same time, I was working in Lincoln Heights as a teen post director, and I worked with what I call street teenagers, who dropped out of school, right? And I got exposed to La Raza newspaper there at the Church of the Epiphany and the Young Chicanos for Community Action. So I joined them at the Piranha Coffee House at the same time that I was at ELAC, with La Vida Nueva, which became UMAS, which became MECHA, where we fought for Chicano studies, went on strike. Yeah. So I had two, one foot on the college and another foot in the community.
Right. Was there a divide there between the college?
There was. Sometimes the student activism was just centered on the campus, but, later on at the height of the Chicano movement, many of the student groups did support the walkout, the Chicano Moratorium, the other mass movements of the community.
Right. Mm-hmm. So tell us about the founding of the Brown Berets. Tell us about that, and then you were the Minister of Information.
I was a minister. I was one of the founders. I mean, David Sanchez, Gloria Arellanes, several people, David Salcedo, Ralph Ramirez. We were at the Piranha Coffee House in East LA getting harassed by the sheriffs, right? And I grew up, in East LA getting harassed by the sheriffs. So we took on the issue of fighting police brutality, police abuse. During the time we were called the Young Chicanos for Community Action. and we got a grant to open up from the church to open up La Piraña Coffee House. So, we were already starting our activism, and then somebody walked in one time with a stack of Brown Berets, and he go, put these on. So it wasn't like we had a founding meeting, it was kind of organic.
Right.
And we started putting them on without a patch. We started wearing the Brown Berets, and then people started calling us, including the cops, Brown Berets, Brown Berets.
Yeah.
And, we looked up to and idolized the Black Panthers, Che Guevara, and they all wore black berets.
Yeah.
So eventually we formalized it, and we founded a group called the Brown Berets. And Brown to put out that we're brown and proud, be proud of your background, your Chicano Mexican American background, right? Because at that time a lot of people were ashamed. They would change their names, dye their hair, try to blend in, right? And the other thing we said is that we're militant. We'll take action, start organizing protests, direct action. So, one of the first protests we did was at the East LA Sheriff Station, where there was a young man killed there by the sheriffs. We organized the first protest there with the Brown Beret. We came out, and I became the Minister of Information.
Yeah. The Brown Berets, along with the student strike committees and Sal Castro, an instructor at Lincoln High School, were some of the organizers of the 1968 East LA walkouts, or blowouts as it was called by the protesters. Can you tell us about what led up to this, and what were you protesting for, and do you believe those demands have been met over time?
Yeah, we won victories. The walkouts, the East LA walkouts of the blowout was the first mass action that the students with the community took on in 1968. After months of preparation, of organizing, of demanding bilingual education, Chicano studies, Chicano teachers, better facilities, open restrooms, open campuses. These are all a series of demands. And the students organized committees in each high school in the East LA area. The Brown Berets, we became more formalized, and the majority of our members were working class youth. I was the only student at ELAC, everybody else was working or had just come out of high school. And so the walkouts was the first major, mass action where thousands of students walked out, and we blew everybody's mind. They didn't think little Mexican-American kids would ever do that. And we hit the national news. And what happened is that March the 6th, 1968, we ran into the high schools, Lincoln. My job was to go to Lincoln and start yelling, walk out, walk out. Wearing the beret. The administrators came out and,
what were the teachers saying?
They go, what are you doing here? You can't do this. Get out of here. We just said, get out. This is serious. This is the walkouts, And then the students started walking out, and then we marched outside. And there's pictures taken by the police of the walkout outside. We marched to Hazard Park. And then we ran over to Roosevelt High School and did the same thing. But by the time we got there, the administrators had locked the gates. So we had to pull from one side while the students pushed from the inside and to pop the gate open. And that's in one of the movies, by the way. That's a true story, because I'll put one thing out that's kind of funny. A lot of people, 50 years later, like to say, I was there, I did this, right? Well, I say I've got photos and the transcripts of the cops say he did that, right?
Yeah, you got the proof.
Yeah, I got it. Okay.
That's great. Okay, so we're going to take a little break here. You're listening to LA State on CalSat LA's Golden Eagle Radio. We're here with Carlos Montes. And we're back. The show is LA State. The station is Golden Eagle Radio. We're here with legendary Chicano activist Carlos Montes. We were just talking about the blowouts. Another huge event that you were participated in was the Chicano Moratorium. It happened in 1970. Nixon was intensifying the war in Vietnam, and Latinos made up 20% of those killed, while only representing 10% of the population of Southwest states. Can you tell us about the moratorium?
No, absolutely. A lot of my friends were getting drafted and sent to Vietnam. A lot of people I went to high school came back dead. I was at ELAC, so I did get a student deferment, but then later on, when I protested the war, I was classified for forget the number, the 1A, but I burnt my draft card. So I was a war resistor. At first we saw the issue that it was targeting, recruiting, the draft was racist, recruiting Chicanos and blacks, right? And Dr. Ralph Guzman did a study out of UCLA that we had a high casualty rate in relationship to our population because we were put up in the front lines
right.
in those dangerous positions. But later on, as we studied the war, we realized that we became radicalized, saying the Vietnamese, a poor peasant country, they want self-determination, they want socialism. What's all this about, right? And we said, you know what? Vietnam should win. They should be free. You know, instead of just stop the war, bring our brothers back, right? So that radicalized us and opened up our eyes to the third world liberation movement, Vietnam, China, Cuba, Latin America. And so the Brown Berets, some of us started to be open to the ideas of third world liberation movements and socialism. And the Black Panther Party during that time, remember, they gave us the Red Book to read, you know, Mao Zedong quotes, right?
Right.
Even though there was a section of the Berets that were still kind of conservative, anti-communist, you know.
Yeah. Was there really? Interesting.
Yeah, a couple, a couple of folks, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, actually, David Sanchez, I'll put it out. Controversial. He won't deny it. He won't deny it, right?
Interesting.
But, so the Vietnam had a major radicalization, not on the Brown Berets, but I think the whole student movement, the SDS, the anti-war movement, you know. And so instead of just saying, bring the troops home, we started saying, you know, Ho Chi Minh, you know.
Right. It got a little.
Yeah.
So, what do you brought up communism. I found a very interesting quote. I want to know.
God.
Because I think it's very interesting. What is the role of like communism in relation to Mexican American rights? So you said this quote. In the LA Times, this is from 67, or 68 actually. So, okay. Communism, that's a white thing. It's pretty hard to mix communists and Mexican Americans. Che doesn't mean a thing to the guy in the streets. He's got his own problems. So what did you mean by this, and do you still believe it?
Okay, I renounce that statement now.
Okay, it's official.
Okay, so I was a young guy, you know, I hadn't, like I said earlier, the educational system and growing up in the so-called Cuban Missile Crisis, and the anti-Russia Cold War, you know, the Cold War era, right? Like you probably don't even know what that is out there, right? So that made us anti-communist, brainwashed us, you know, kind of to be, the boogeyman, the Reds, you know.
Yeah.
So when I got into the Chicano movement, we saw the enemy as being the white people, white racism, right, and anything white. We rejected anything white, and so it wasn't, like I said earlier, till we learned about the Vietnamese, that they wanted socialism, that they were so-called communists, right? The communists, you know, that's what Nixon kept saying, want to stop the communist threat. So we started, what's all this about, you know? And we started reading about Vietnam and how they defeated the Japanese and then the French and then the U.S., right?
Right.
So that opened my mind up to be open to socialism. Well, I'm a socialist now. I could say, you know, I'm a homegrown Chicano communist, right? Controversial out there, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to get dissed. Some people go, Carlos said he was a communist. Remember, homegrown, East LA. I didn't have to go to Russia to be that.
Well, yeah, and I was listening to an interview with you, and you were talking about how at some point you realized that it wasn't just simply white people, it was corporations. It was the capitalist system that kind of produced a lot of the problems for Mexican Americans. Right.
No, you're right. You know, what happened in the March of 68 after the blowouts, we were invited by Martin Luther King, before he was killed, to go to the Poor People's Campaign in Washington, D.C., right? And he invited all the militant groups like the Brown Berets, the Crusade for Justice, Alianza Federal. So we went, and when I was there for 2 months, I saw poor whites from Appalachia. They were poorer than us. Poor blacks, Puerto Ricans, Native Americans. I started seeing, the white man is not the enemy. It's poverty, it's avarice, profit making. And then I finally found the word capitalism. And then I started learning about imperialism, where capitalism then goes throughout the world to dominate countries. So it's not the white man. It's the capitalism is the problem.
Yeah.
Then so that was part of it, the Poor People's Campaign, and then traveling to New York, where Stan Steiner interviewed me for that book and asked me about communism. So it was like, I'll put it out there. I was immature, activist, just learning.
Right.
Where I said that.
Right. But there is the thing about that, I'm thinking about this, Mexican American community is very religious. So that probably, Mexican Americans, very religious. Brown Berets had mass together. A lot of you guys were religious, I believe, or no? Not so much?
Well, not that much.
No, okay. So, but that would have been a hard jump, right, for a lot of people.
Well, yeah, what I don't know what you meant by we had mass together. We had a cross on our emblem, but the cross represented the suffering of our people.
Right.
Where there was the lynchings, the brutality, the exploitation. And we grew up, some of us grew up Catholic, and we weren't anti-church, right? And we didn't go to mass. I mean, I don't know where that came from, but we were, I think what I was thinking of, which was the sit-ins at the Board of Education, and they were doing mass there. Oh, well, no. Well, see what happened. There you go. What happened is Father John Luz at the Church of the Epiphany here in Lincoln Heights, he opened up his church to the Young Chicanos for Community, La Raza newspaper, the United Farm Workers. So it was kind of like a Chicano center.
Yeah.
And I grew up Catholic, and he's Episcopalian, so that opened me up to have a good view of the Episcopalians as being a progressive church.
Right.
And now
they still are.
Yeah, they still are. So what happened when we had to sit in at the Board of Education? You're right. Father John Luz came and did a mass there.
Yeah.
So we saw it as solidarity. We weren't anti-religious.
Interesting. Another big event that happened during the moratorium involved the famed LA Times reporter Ruben Salazar, who actually died during the protest. Salazar was one of the first mainstream reporters to cover the Chicano community and was sympathetic to the cause of Chicano activists. He once described you personally as a lean, intense young man who often sports a Zapata mustache, noted for his articulateness on the Chicano movement and his wit. Many question the official report that he was accidentally killed by a tear gas gun shot by the LA sheriffs, which hit him in the head. What or who do you think killed Salazar?
Yeah, he was targeted by the sheriffs, by the system, because he himself told Phil Montes, who was a U.S. Commissioner on Civil Rights, that I'm being followed. I'm afraid for my life. And Phil, if you interview him, he said, are you paranoid? Are you sure? So there's documentation of spying on Ruben Salazar going back, because when he was a reporter, he traveled to Vietnam, Santo Domingo, and Cuba when he was in the Mexican Bureau. There was already an FBI file on him. And then in his writings, when he was brought back, by the way, he was born in Juarez, grew up in El Paso, then came to L.A.
You were also born in Juarez?
Yeah. I was raised in Juarez, grew up in El Paso, technically, right. But it's the same town, little town.
Wow.
So he started with the El Paso Times. When he started writing for the L.A. Times, when they brought him back from the Mexican Bureau, he started being very critical of the police brutality and killings by the sheriff and the LAPD, and also the federal authorities. They raided a place and they killed a couple of young men, and they were the wrong ones, right? And so he was actually brought in by the chief at that time, LAPD, and said, hey, he was admonished, and he's told them not to stir up the Mexicans. They told him to stop it. And then he transitioned from the newspaper to the news director of the new up-and-coming news TV station, KMEX, where he had a platform to broadcast to the Spanish-speaking community. So in my view, he was targeted already. They were following him. He said so to his cameraman during August 29th. We're being followed. We're being tailed.
Wow.
Right, and during the August 29th anti-war march and rally, the LAPD and the sheriffs were ready. They attacked the peaceful rally, tear gas people, beat people, killed 2 young men. And Ruben took refuge at the Silver Dollar Bar down Whittier Boulevard.
Yeah.
And then the cops came, surrounded the place, and they came out. Ruben came out. There's a picture. He came out with a Restrepo, and they had their media badges, and they said, "We're media, we want to come out." And then with a shotgun, they pushed them, go back in, go back in. They supposedly got a phone call that there was a man with a gun. That's probably an excuse or a lie, in my view, right? There's always, oh, gun, there's a gun, there's something going on. So they pushed them back in. They surrounded the place. Then they brought in a deputy who was using a tear gas missile projectile that's used to go to barricaded situations, not the canister, but the missile.
Yeah.
And he shot it through the open door, and supposedly they said it hit on the top, but it hit Ruben Salazar in the head and instantly killed him,
Wow.
So in our view, he was assassinated. He was targeted. They knew he was there. He came out. They saw him. They pushed him back.
Right.
Right.
All right. Well, we'll get back to talking about issues right after this. You're listening to Golden Eagle Radio. The show is LA State.
Thanks for asking, but I'd rather not send you nude pictures. I'm camera shy. I already said no. It's against my religion. I'm giving my dog a bath. You can have pictures of that. Pressure gives me hives. Under my clothes, I'm a robot. Hold on, let me ask my mom. Sorry, my webcam is broken. I'm worried they'll get passed around school. Unfortunately, I just had my clothes surgically attached to my body. If they got out, I might never be president. I'm already naked, under my clothes. Not even if you were all three Jonas Brothers. I have a rash. I have nudophobia. I have lizard skin. The more you ask, the less I want to. You're not the boss of me. Nudity makes me vomit. I'm a vampire, so I don't show up in pictures anyways. Your badgering has really killed the mood.
When someone is pressuring you to do something you don't want to, how many ways can you say no before they get the message? Let us know at that'snotcool.com. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
All right, and we're back. The show is LA State. The station is Golden Eagle Radio. We're talking today with legendary Chicano activist Carlos Montes. So we got into the history a bit, Mr. Montes. I was wondering if we could talk about current issues going on. In the past presidential election, despite what many would consider anti-Mexican rhetoric, Donald Trump was able to get 30% of the Mexican vote, Latino vote.
High, really?
Yeah.
Them Cubans, those Argentinians.
What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, there is a percentage of Spanish-speaking folks that'll vote for Trump, right, and Republican, but the great majority are working class, red. I was going to say, not red, the Democratic Party, Green Party, Independent, and more Mexican Americans, Central Americans are becoming citizens and voting Democratic, and many states are becoming blue, like Nevada, right? Yeah. Say Nevada, and eventually Arizona will too, and that's the problem in Texas. They want to keep us disenfranchised, keep the vote down, so they cut up the districts. But there was a small percentage that voted for Trump. I dispute that'd be 30% though. Of what? Of the total voting
population.
Really?
Or 30% of Mexican votes were for Trump.
Mexican?
American, or Latino. I should say Latino. Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
Who put that out? You got to look at your sources.
Right.
But anyway, he won, and using scare tactics, scapegoating immigrants, scapegoating Mexicans, and calling us rapists and criminals. But I think he won by giving false hopes to the poor working class, saying we're going to be your savior, I'm going to get you jobs, I'm going to get you out of this rut, which is a total lie. He's a snake in the grass. He's a New York shyster, man.
Right.
Unfortunately, they fell for it, but I think it's coming to fruition now that they can see he's a big liar, man. Everything that he's doing. Hopefully they'll see through it.
Right. With the election of Trump, immigration is obviously a huge topic. A lot of people are talking about the ICE raids. A lot of people are talking about sanctuary cities. What is the current, I know you're personally involved in this battle, what is the current situation regarding undocumented immigrants in Los Angeles as you see it?
Well, it's a bad situation, obviously. There's The Homeland Security and ICE has announced that they're going to do raids and start rounding up young men just because they may be affiliated with gangs, which is a false scare tactic. And, so the community is organizing Know Your Rights workshops, defense committees, raid alerts. And so, DACA's under attack. The DACA, Student Deferred Action for Children of Americans, Deferred Action for Children Arrivals, who were able to get DACA. Trump says, I might take it away, I may keep it, I might extend it. They're kind of up in the air. But the majority of undocumented families that we work with in Boyle Heights are concerned, are scared, of going to governmental agencies. There's less people in the streets. There's attacks on us at, like the street vendor, El Hotel, who was attacked by someone. So, but the community is fighting back. We've been protesting, pushing for California to be a sanctuary state, protesting to push that legislation. Organizations such as the NDLA, National Day Labor Organization, is calling for a national march on Texas and Austin, and to protest against the Texas governor and state legislature passing an anti-sanctuary law.
Right.
So, we're under attack, but we're fighting back. We've gone through similar stuff in the 90s with Governor Wilson in California, and Arnold Schwarzenegger being anti-immigrant, passing legislation that was attacking immigrants.
Right.
And eventually many of us organized mass protest, 100,000 people in the street in Boyle Heights in 1994.
Right.
Were you born, Ben?
Yeah, I was born in 91.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And defeating Prop 187 and eventually getting the Republicans out of office. So now we have a more pro-immigrant rights Democratic Party in California.
Right.
Where we're pushing for not only the driver's license bill, sanctuary state, health care, in-state tuition, but that's only California. Now we have to continue to organize and push for that type of basic democratic rights throughout the United States.
Right. How would you rate Governor Brown as far as this issue is concerned? Jerry Brown, our current governor, do you think he's pro-immigrant? Would you describe
I think
him
he is. He is. I mean, he did sign and support the driver's license for undocumented.
Right.
And he supported other key legislation, He was a little cautious in the beginning of backlash, so he didn't do it immediately,
Right.
He waited a year, after he passed certain legislation.
Yeah.
So, I may get dissed on this thing, but Brown, if you compare his overall history, on immigrant rights, on environmental issues, he's
you're happy with him.
Yeah. Yes, I'm happy with him. They're going to come and call me if you disagree with me. Right. Compared to Arnold Schwarzenegger, man. Compared to Trump, compared to Pete Wilson. Give
Reagan,
me a break,
let's go to
man.
Reagan.
Compared to Reagan. He destroyed the unions, destroyed welfare.
You're currently protesting police violence against Mexican youth in Boyle Heights. Can you tell us more about this?
Yes. It's part of the attack on immigrants and the Chicano Mexican-American community that includes, extreme poverty, gentrification. The police are the spear, the tip of the spear. So last year they killed 5 young Chicanos, and this year they killed 2 and shot 1 that survived. And, Jesse Romero last year, Jose Mendez are young teenagers who are undocumented family, working families. They have kids that go to school, local school. They were doing fine. They were doing good in school. Yeah. And they were killed by the LAPD Hollenbeck police station. And the videos and the witnesses that we have totally contradict the police, that the police are lying.
Yeah.
And there's other killings that have taken place at night. And by the way, in the killing of Jose, as well as Jesse, the cops that killed them had a prior killing. Wow. In Jesse's case, the guy at Medina had just killed someone like 2 weeks before. He was back on the force. So there's a problem at Hollenbeck Police Station. There's a nest of assassins. It's our view as CSO, Community Service Organization, which I represent, Centro CSO, Community Service Organization. We've had 3 or 4 protests at the Hollenbach Police Station to demand stop the killings. We had a protest on July the 14th, and we had another protest on August the 1st, where we said take a national night out against violence. We said police violence as well as any kind of violence. So we're saying that the LEPD stereotypes Latinos, young Chicanos, just because they wear baggy clothes or T-shirts, they accuse them of being gang members or taggers, and they target them, and they think they can get away by killing them and harassing them. And we're saying no. And this is part of the Trump attack. In the first 60 days of the Trump administration, he announced an executive order giving police more powers. He also announced his support for the Blue Lives Matter movement, which is the police. And just a couple of days ago, he was in New York at a police graduation, attacking Central Americans and so-called gang members and asking police to go all out and come and get us. So, it's an all-target, on Latinos right now and blacks. So we're saying stop the killings, prosecute the cops, fire the cops, because we've always had 1 or 2 killings of young men in Boyle Heights, but not, 5, and now we're up to 2. And the third one, Pedro Echeverria, he was shot. The only reason he survived is because the neighbor came out and started yelling, stop shooting him. The cop turned around and shot the lady in the leg by mistake. Jeez. And then the guy survived. 18-year-old, he just graduated from high school the day before, Central High School. So the killing is institutionalized police racism against Chicano people. We're saying stop the racist police killings of our young men.
Alrighty, well, we're going to take a break now. We're here with Chicano activist Carlos Montes. We'll be back after this. The show is LA State. The station is Golden Eagle Radio. Hello, listeners. This is Joe Brizzolara, host of LA State on Cal State LA's Golden Eagle Radio, here to tell you about a fun upcoming event, How to Read El Pato Pascual, Disney's Latin America and Latin America's Disney. This art exhibition explores the histories and ways Latin American artists have responded to, played with, reappropriated, and misappropriated Disney iconography. The exhibition runs September 9th through December 16th, 2017. The gallery hours are Monday through Thursday and Saturday, 12 to 5 p.m. Admission to the Luckman Gallery is free of charge. Go check it out. I've checked out some of the images from this, and both visually stunning and extremely thought-provoking. Once again, this exhibition will be running September 9th through December 16th at the Luckman Gallery on campus. Admission is free. Check it out. All right, and we're back. The station is Golden Eagle Radio. The show is LA State. We cover local and state political issues affecting students here at Cal State LA. We're here with one of the co-founding members of the Brown Berets, Carlos Montes. Mr. Montes, last week we did an episode on the gentrification battle in Boyle Heights, and you are one of the many roles that you have played is you were on the executive member. You're on the executive board of the Boyle Heights Neighborhood Council.
Yes.
Can you tell us about the council and what your function is on it?
No, I'm currently the secretary. I've been on the Boyle Heights Neighborhood Council about 4 years, and we were elected by the community. And at one point, I was elected president. And during my tenure as president, we fought against demanding the shutdown of the Exide battery recycling plant that was polluting lead. Jose Huizar, the councilman, and the other politicians wanted to have it fixed and reopened. We said no. We voted to shut it down. We testified before the Department of Toxic Substance Controls to shut it down. We also supported the driver's license bill for undocumented. We also made a movement to support the saving of Hazard Park from the gentrification attack by USC Health Science Campus, wanted to run the street through the park. We also took on the attack by the charter privatization movement in Boyle Heights, where they wanted to put a charter school at the Roosevelt High School, collegiate charter. We passed a resolution supporting the United Teachers Union in their fight against charters. So this is part of the anti-gentrification movement to save our community, save our schools, save our parks, save or protect us from the pollution. And the historical part is CSO, including myself, were involved in the movement to stop the prison in East LA. They wanted to build a prison. We also, Vernon wanted to build an incinerator, which would have polluted all of Boyle Heights. We fought that. And then we also fought the oil pipeline, So Boyle Heights has a history. The original CSO in the 40s, 50s fought against the 5 freeway, believe it or not. Mm-hmm. The people didn't give up because the 5 freeway cuts Boyle Heights in half,
right,
from the Hollenbeck and the Heights, right?
Yeah.
So Boyle Heights has a history of fighting. In the 90s, I was elected to the Project Area Committee of this Community Redevelopment Agency. And I won on a platform of stopping what I call Chicano removal. The urban renewal, we say that's Chicano removal.
Right.
So I was elected, and it was an advisory board, right? But we voted against every major development project that we saw is coming into Boyle Heights to bring in corporations and big high-rise apartment buildings. We voted it down, and we would say, we don't want it. Yeah. The most we approved was to improve the streets with trees, trash cans, and also to the facade of local businesses. Because during that time, it was Richard Latorre, and then after that, it was Antonio Villaraigosa, who were our council folks.
Yeah.
And we saw that developers from downtown were eyeing, the so-called Skid Row area downtown, and we were afraid that then from there they would jump into Boyle Heights.
Right.
So we've been actively fighting. So because I was the president, a very activist president, the more conservative element within the Boyle Heights Council ran a candidate, Vera Del Pozo, and she beat me the second time around by 1 vote.
Wow.
Right. And then, so she was pro-cop, anti-immigrant, that's pro-development, but we were able to still defeat the Sears Tower project, market rate luxury condominiums on Olympic and Soto. We were lobbied hard by the company, by their lobbyist, and also some people on the board like Vera Del Pozo. Don't get mad at me, Vera, but you voted for it. And Jose Huizar, who wanted upscale luxury apartments. And we fought. We said, no, we don't want it, and we voted against it. And I got a lot of, because I was one of the deciding votes to say no to the luxury apartments, right?
Right.
So we get hit with, and I'm also have been a strong supporter now for over 20 years of Unión de Vecinos, who really has a membership base and who supports and protects tenants from evictions and dislocation. They do have a legitimate base, and they do have concrete work. And we've always invited them in the past to join our May Day marches and rallies and to speak. And then I've gone to their meetings and their marches. I was at the first mariachi plaza. Well, also the protest, one of the protests to support the mariachis from being dislocated from their apartment on 2nd Street off of Boyle. Yeah. I was also at the first march at the Arts District that was held on Anderson and 3rd Street.
Right.
And there was some hater lady there, Chela, who started yelling and screaming at me. I said, what? Because the parents asked me to speak. But anyway, I get enough the subject.
Well, yeah, actually.
Get some controversy here. Yeah. Chela's a hater.
That's what I was going to ask. I mean, you've been called out. You were called out by the Red Guards of Los Angeles as not being hardline enough against gentrification.
Right.
They accused you of, this is from their website, quote, selling the community watered-down reformist solutions and of collaborating with the forces of capitalism. What is your response to this?
Well, that's pretty outrageous. It's obviously fake news, It's pretty infantile.
Yeah.
Especially when you put it on Facebook and you don't walk up to a meeting or to a protest and tell me that to my face, right? First of all, definitely collaboration is outlandish. I don't collaborate with what forces of capitalism, I don't. Now, the thing with reforms, that's a debate issue. I've fought for the $15 wage increase in L.A. I fought for
which was successful.
New schools in Boyle Heights. We fought to get a new school, which was fought. We fought for rent control years ago. We fought for the driver's license. So I will fight for a reform,
right,
which I consider a democratic right.
Right.
That we fight for. We want bilingual education. We want the right to vote. We want the right to be citizens and residents.
Yeah.
That's nothing wrong, But I do believe that our long-range struggle is for a revolution in this society, where we have where the means of production are for the benefit of all working people, right? So the Red Guard they're so far left, ultra left, that they become rightist or conservative by attacking the good work, not only CSO but our other organizations or good projects, So I haven't seen anything concrete that they've done, and other than calling for armed struggle. And to call for armed struggle at this point in our struggle I think would be suicidal, but also ultra leftist. And I've seen some of their Facebook postings. They have pictures of Gonzalo from the Peru, the Communist Party of Peru, the Shining Path. And they were so ultra left and armed struggle that they would kill anyone that disagreed with them. This is in Peru.
Right.
And you'd have to read up on it, that they would kill union leaders and indigenous leaders who had a base who disagreed with them. Right. So, obviously these guys they don't have any power. They don't have anything, Eventually they're going to go away. One of their main leaders, Luis, is from the Valley. He doesn't even speak English, Right. He works for a nonprofit. He works for IDEPSCA. So he's got good health insurance. He's got a good job. His picture's on the website, so nothing, you go to the IDEPSCA website. He uses a different name on Facebook, though. He's got a good damn job, good salary, goes to Kaiser. I've seen him at Kaiser getting his health insurance. I'm an old guy. I'm 69 years old. I get Medicare, man,
Yeah.
And I fight for Medicare for everybody. So I can go on and on. They're really misguided. The Red Guard is. There's a few good people in Defend Boyle Heights. I do know that several of them are contradictory because they have made money by the nonprofit industrial complex, which they criticize. One of them worked for Inner City Struggle. They worked for East LA Community Corporation, and she also worked for what's her name? She ran for Congress, Maria Cabildo. So we're in a fight to fight gentrification. We have to unite and work together. We can have our differences. But, my history's there. They started a couple of years ago. Like I said, I went to the first anti-art gallery protest they had. And I was there just to support them, to be supportive of them. And,
yeah. All right. Well, we're going to take one more break here. The show is LA State. The station is Golden Eagle Radio. I'm here with Carlos Montes right after this. Alrighty, and we're back on LA State, on Cal State LA's Golden Eagle Radio. We're talking about gentrification in Boyle Heights with activist Carlos Montes. So I was reading about the walkouts, and I found something very interesting. One of the members of the community there was not necessarily supportive of you guys. He said that he remembered the behavior of the protesters as being rude, loud, and disrespectful. Many say similar things about today's anti-gentrification protesters. They may sympathize with the cause, but they disapprove of the expletives used on signs. They calling out people who cross their picket lines as being race traitors and destruction to property. So how do you feel about this? Do you think it's different today than it was when you were protesting? And is there a standard for decorum when engaging in civil disobedience?
Well, you know what? When we walked out, We were yelling Chicano Power, Brown Pride, United, Raza Unida. And these were slogans, and we were raising our fist, and we were breaking out of school.
Yeah.
Now, we some of the more conservative element in our community said, oh, you shouldn't walk out, you shouldn't protest. And we were arrested for protesting. We were arrested for conspiracy to disrupt the school system. That's totally different. This is a legitimate mass protest. That's totally different than calling someone a sellout that maybe walks into disagrees with them in the coffee house, a coffee boycott, of weird coffee house.
Weird
wave, right? Because the folks that attacked us were more Republican, conservative Chicanos, right? And the police that said you're disrupting the schools, you're being impolite. I don't compare that mass protest to 5 or 6 or 10 people picketing in front of a wave, or breaking a window, anonymous break. I don't know who broke the window.
Yeah,
right?
it should be noted that has not been proven to be associated with that organization.
That's true. And to get to the root of your question, though, it's totally different. I wouldn't compare it. When we did protest. At the police station, at the recruiting station. We had our picket signs. We had our bullhorns. We were loud, right? And we did sit-ins. When Reagan came to speak at the Biltmore Hotel, we got up. We did the Chicano hand clap. We walked out, throwing detergent on somebody, I don't know, You don't know, if you throw detergent on a bunch of people, you don't know who these people are, Are they the owners, Is it Eli Broad?
Yeah.
The big bourgeois guy, Okay, maybe throw detergent on him, but a bunch of people at a gallery.
Do you think it's too much? Do you think that they go too far with
No, I wasn't
detergent?
there, so I wouldn't say that, I think that when there's general public at an event, you gotta see who they are. Maybe go inside, talk to people, and explain to them what you're doing. I'm obviously against the proliferation of upper class galleries in Boyle Heights, and I went to the first protest that was held. And I think that mass protest of civil disobedience. And when we did a boycott, the great boycott, I'll give you another example, United Farm Worker boycott, right?
Cesar Chavez.
It took years, okay? We would picket the Safeway stores every day. Mm-hmm. The farm workers would, and we would help them, right? Yeah. Not once a day, once a week for a couple hours. If you really want to boycott, you got to boycott them all, right?
Right.
And then Fred Ross asked the Brown Berets to go to the Grand Central Market downtown, because they were delivering truckloads of grapes, right? And he wanted to protest, So we went down there, and we're in the 3, 4 in the morning, right, protesting. And then all of a sudden the trucks come in, and they start unloading them. And we're picketing. The farm workers, remember, they're nonviolent picketing. So they're unloading the grapes, and they're putting them on the what do you call it, the loading dock. So Fred Ross keep walking, go up and down, So eventually one of the young men and women say, well, man, they're loading all these grapes, man. And then as we walked by, we would just kind of touch them or hit them. And then they were kind of wobbly, and eventually they started falling. So all these giant crepes of grapes started falling. So the target was a big multinational corporation. It was farming, agricultural business in the United States, the biggest ones in the U.S., bringing grapes into the mass market of California to go to the markets, right? And so we knocked down the grapes. But what happened, Fred Ross right away, who's a director, who, I don't know if you know who Fred Ross is. I don't. He's Saul Alinsky, who trained Cesar Chavez, was against it, and he called it off right away. So, that's a lot different. We were targeting a big corporation,
right,
with knocking down the grapes, okay? and boycotting Safeway and all the markets, and they get an insult by people walking out. White people walk out eating grapes. Oh yeah, you guys are a bunch of Mexicans. Get out of here.
Yeah.
And we would say, oh, forget you. We would cuss them out. That, I don't think you can compare that to 8 or 9 people picketing at the Weird Wave coffee house.
Right. Who do you see as the main force of gentrification? Or who do you think that? Where do you think you should take that fight?
That's where I was going to come at. The main force of gentrification in Boyle Heights is multinational corporations that are coming in and buying up the property, buying up the big apartment buildings, the hotels, right? Like the Chicago Hotel. I have friends that live on Chicago Street, on First Street, and they live in these studios, one bedroom apartment or a studio apartment, and their rents have been jacked up by the corporations. They come in, they paint, they put security cameras, they put a guard maybe, they put beef up the laundry room, and then they start evicting long-term tenants who were late on their rent, or maybe who have extra tenants living with them. And then the other people that remain, they jack up their rent. So these are the culprits. These are the ones that we should be fighting. And I commend Unión de Vecinos. They're the only ones that are going door to door in these buildings, talking to the tenants and organizing them and defending them. That's the only ones I've seen, that people tell me, oh yeah, there was this lady here and it was from Unión de Vecinos. The other folks in Defend Boyle Heights and Red Guard, and they're not doing it. Because I'm out there in the street every day. I live in Boyle Heights. I grew up in Boyle Heights. And I've been accused of living in Alhambra by Mago Mad Dog Bulldog. She's a pro-cop, pro-police, anti-immigrant lady. She's attacking me right now because we just did the protest at the police station to take back the night against violence. Anyway, so the other forces of is multinational corporations like the big one that bought the Weimerwood Apartments. They bought the Sears Tower, and they're coming in and buying more property, And there's also these land swappers. They buy 4 or 5 houses, they paint them, clean them up, and then they flip them. And then those folks, I tried renting several houses in Boyle Heights. I couldn't afford it. It was like $2,500, $3,500 for old houses.
Yeah.
And, I lucked out and I got me a small little apartment, But so what I'm saying is that we've targeted the big development projects that have come into Boyle Heights. We were against the metro coming in 10 years ago. People don't remember that.
Right.
We fought against the metro. Right. We had an organization, Unidad, that was helped by the Legal Aid Foundation to stop the metro, because we knew the metro was going to come in. It was going to bring in the hipsters, the capitalists, and gentrification.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. All right, so we'll wrap it up here. Last question. You've been out of East LA for over half a century now, or around there, half a century. What do you see for the future of East LA?
Of East LA in general, or
East LA, Boyle Heights?
Oh, what I
East LA.
see the future is more poverty, more violence by the police. Conditions are going to intensify, or as they say, the contradictions will intensify. But people will unite and join organizations like CSO, Unión de Vecinos, other organizations, independent grassroots organizations are going to grow. And they're going to have a mass base where the rights of working class immigrant women will be respected and their voice will be heard. And that's where we base our organization on working class immigrant families. And we're going to fight back. We're going to continue. We're going to continue fighting against immigration, against the Trump attacks, against the police attacks, and against gentrification, and against anybody that comes into our community and tries to dominate and attack us, like including not only the corporations, but the so-called saviors of the ultra-left that come into our community. They want to save us. They're not even from here. Yeah. So anyway, we're going to unite and stay strong and win.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Montes. This has been amazing, very informative. Thank you so much for coming down. The show is LA State. The station is Golden Eagle Radio. We'll be right back after this.
1 in 7 Americans will struggle with addiction during their lifetime. Want to know how you can help? Go to heretolisten.com for tips and tools to help turn addiction around. A public service announcement brought to you by the Ad Council.
All right, well, our time is up for today. I want to thank our guest, Chicano activist Carlos Montes. That was a great sit down. Tune in next week for a new episode. Thanks to our engineer, Gecia Bell. This episode of LA State was produced by Joe Brizzolara, Eron Franklin, and Diego Barrera. It was written by Joe Brizzolara. Music by Ryan Sutera and Doug Van Rennen. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time. This is LA State, a production of Cal State LA's Golden Eagle Radio. LA State, real media for real students.